Hi, I'm Wendy Lansdown and I'm a community coordinator for the County Council covering East Cambridgeshire. And my role is all about kind of helping to glue the system together and enabling good community action, kind of starting with what's strong. So democracy, it is a big question, isn't it? And I suppose in the kind of origin of the word, it's about people power, and I quite like that the basis of it is about people power. Um, and I guess we traditionally think about it in relation to voting and elected representatives, and I think that's really important. I think those things are important. Um, but for me, there's also kind of a wider element to think about in terms of democracy in its wider context. And I suppose that's perhaps more useful for me to talk about in my role. And there, I would think democracy is more about kind of voice and agency and being able to influence the world around you. And in the world I work in, that's particularly in relation to the community you live in. So whilst voting is one way of influencing, I think there's also, and I'm particularly interested in the way people's actions can influence, even through kind of like day-to-day life, personal actions influence and shape the community around you. So a positive, healthy democracy, I think, is about us all taking part. Personally, my kind of involvement is around kind of the community aspect of that, and kind of coming from a community development point of view, I think it is all about people across our communities, a whole diversity of people having kind of skin in their game, in the game in their community. So having a say, having agency, and also importantly, really being connected. So us being connected with each other, and listening really hard. Really hearing what others in our community say, and that doesn't always mean agreeing, but it does mean, yeah, listening and not just listening to respond, but actually listening to really hear and understand each other. And then from that kind of just looking for and finding the opportunities where we can work together, collaborate, build ideas, whatever it might be. And sometimes those are really quite small things, but I often think those small things are what collectively build a really kind of healthy society. I suppose I've been involved in different ways. I mean, I've mentioned my work role, but then obviously I'm involved personally as well. So, for example, I'm really proud and privileged to have been a kind of founding trustee for Abbey People, the local community group in Cambridge, and it's been amazing to see that grow and thrive. And I suppose that's really a lovely example of how something that starts off quite small can really grow. And because initially that was what brought people together was it was one of the jubilees. It was a community celebration, and a group of mums, I think it was, went and posted individual letters around people's doors to say, we'd like to get together and have some kind of celebration on the green. And from that really simple but brilliant idea that somebody was bold enough to go and take action of posting notes through people's doors, then not only did the event happen, but then it kind of gathered and coalesced all this positive energy around wanting to create something within the local community, which then grew into what is now Abbey People. I mean, I'm no longer a trustee, but I really love being involved, still going along to some of the events, and it's just brilliant to see how that's thrived and how now Nikki is the CEO there, is really kind of just taking that to new levels. And something I see her do, which I think again is about a healthy democracy, is actually just kind of spotting where there's real enthusiasm within the community for something and getting alongside people and helping create that. So recently there's been a Verge project in Barnwell where they've created this beautiful wildlife verge, and that again is that how do you take something that's a seed of an idea, no pun intended, to then kind of really just help people achieve what they already have the goals for and connect them to others around them, to create fantastic stuff within the community. Well, for the example of Abbey People, I think it's, if somebody's bothered to put a note through my door and is interested in something, then I want to be part of that. It's like I want to help make that thing fly. So I like to join in something to help something succeed, I think, in that way. But also, I suppose, professionally, I think what probably really inspired me was actually early in my career, I worked as a carer, I was a support worker, and I worked for years in supporting people with learning difficulties and learning disabilities, and then kind of went up through into the kind of management of that. And I think what stayed with me and struck me as incredibly important is how everybody's voice is important, and how sometimes voices, for example, people who have learning difficulties and disabilities, can be excluded, and that everybody has something to offer, and there's so I think that is something that really inspired me, and actually then meant I went on to a role with an organisation then called Speaking Up. They're now called Voiceability, and I used to coordinate their Parliament project, which was essentially about people with learning difficulties becoming MPs themselves within their own Parliament and representing the views of their peers. So, and then kind of saying, right, galvanising around issues that they felt strongly about, and meeting with whether it was councillors or business people or whoever they wanted to influence, kind of supporting them to influence those people. So that I really enjoyed that role, and I enjoyed being able to help amplify people's voices and actually seeing seeing when changes were made. For example, I mean, this was many years ago, it's about 20 years ago now, and at that time they're just beginning, it was the beginning of like the Changing Places campaign, which is where kind of toilets that are fully accessible, that can be used for every type of disability. It was they began a campaign for that, and you're just starting to see that succeed as I left that role, and now to see more and more Changing Places services available in places really warms my heart, because you think actually the difference that makes to people in order to be able to go out for a whole day, not just for an hour or two, is it's a big change. So, and often it wasn't me making the difference, but I think it's that I think very much just helping others catalyse or achieve what they want to achieve is something I find rewarding personally. And then that translates into my role now, I suppose. So in my role as community coordinator, that's very much about kind of looking at kind of the partnership opportunities. How can we act as almost kind of like I said, I tend to describe it as the glue in the system, between whether it's, I work a lot with GPs, with the different layers of councils, with the voluntary sector, faith sector, and everybody really. And it's about kind of thinking, how do we recognise that we're all aiming at the same thing? We're all aiming for healthy, thriving, connected communities. And if we're aiming for that, then there's got to be more we can do together to create it. I'm realising this all sounds probably a little bit overly idealistic, but there are many, many challenges along the way. There's lots of things go wrong. There's times when the air is blue, but but at the same time, it's always, that it's worth it, because there are ways forward, and for all the challenges, there are positive changes as well. And often they come from people in very different places becoming connected and seeing where they're aiming at the same thing, and perhaps produce an alliance that wasn't there before, that just unlocks something. So much of it, I think, is about relationships as well, relationships and shared values, and then how you kind of bring those to life collectively. I suppose for me, where I see the fault lines and the challenges is where you see kind of increased polarisation within society, within our communities, and I worry about that polarisation of views. And I've talked about listening a lot already, but I think so much of it is about that need for everybody to listen more intently to each other and really take the time to understand where each other are coming from, and not be dismissive or judgmental, to hold things lightly. I think I often talk about holding things lightly in my rota. So before rushing to judgment, kind of really ensuring you fully understand something, and try and look for the areas where you kind of can work together with people. And I think that's particularly important because there are, I think, for us here in Cambridgeshire, in Cambridge specifically, Cambridge is the most unequal city in the country, and it's like that's a huge challenge, and one that only collaboration will help tackle, I think. So yeah, I think that's, to me, listening is the start. Obviously, it's not. We then need to act and work together, but until we've started by really hearing each other, we're not going to get very far. One of the things that I'm working on and really enjoying working on at the moment is working with something called appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is essentially a listening technique. It's a very kind of conversational way of listening and hearing people. So instead of what we sometimes do in perhaps particularly in public service, where we'll ask in a formal way, how do you feel about our service, or whatever it might be, this is much more about having a conversation, which is probably more like you would have down the pub, much more informal, relaxed, informal, but I think informal can sometimes bring out a richer, more meaningful conversation than our usual tick boxes. So it's kind of having a full conversation with people, and again, kind of looking to build on what's strong. So actually, we used appreciative inquiry in to support the work of the Poverty Strategy Commission as well. There was we've now got about 100 of us across the county who had trained from. It's very simple training. It's 3 hours from a lovely colleague in Plymouth. Some simple training we have, and then we're kind of using that together to think, how can we listen and hear our communities better? So, like I say, we used it for the commission, and that was very much about just really hearing people's first-hand experience of what it's like to live in poverty and the challenges. And so we went to where people were. We spent time at food banks, baby banks, in all over the place. We went everywhere. There's had about 70 conversations that was all about kind of understanding what it felt like for people and what made a difference, and then listening to those full conversations together in the first person through what's called a sense-making process, and then you kind of hear the themes coming out, and that's something that we did together, and has helped to inform the work so far. And I feel that it would be really good to kind of continue that, and as the commission goes from hearing and reporting to then kind of into delivery and responding phase. So excited about that. I think so long as we start from the right place of connecting, collaborating, listening. I realise I'm getting quite probably a little repetitive in some of this, but I think if we get those things right and we get those things right collectively, then wherever it takes us is the right place. So we're I'm in community development. We use an approach which is called the acronym is ABCD, so asset-based community development, and that's really all about building on what's strong. So rather than trying to fix people or see all the negatives, you kind of start by going, okay, what's working and how can we build on that? And it's not about saying there isn't anything wrong. Actually, yes, there's a recognition that life isn't perfect, but that often we get furthest when we build on the positive rather than get too entwined in what's wrong. So yeah, and in a similar way, I think for individuals, rather kind of thinking from a service point of view, something is really good to hear more and more services in different parts of the system talking about now is this idea of what matters to you. So perhaps historically, services have tried to fix people or tried to say, right, here's, I come from this silo or this bit of a service, so I can do my menu of things for you or to you. And it's really lovely to see a change in how people are working, and the first question being much more about what matters to you. And that might not be the same thing that matters to the service, but I think we're getting to a place which really excites me about actually different services working together, having kind of trusted partners. So if there's somebody that someone works with who's really trusted, that relationship will kind of be really important, and that they can kind of bring in other partners and other players to support whatever it is that individual wants to achieve. I suppose I'm saying that kind of starting from what matters to you and building from there, I think, is a really good way forward.